Now, over the last 4 years or so, hundreds of young British men and women have gone to Syria and Iraq to fight for an organisation dedicated to the destruction of their own country. Some took to Islamic State's cause so enthusiastically that they became the faces of the extremists' call to arms, carrying out the most brutal acts for all the world to see. Others became soldiers, wives, killers and enforcers at the heart of Islamic State's self-proclaimed caliphate. At least 130 have died fighting for IS, but many still remain, and with the fall of Raqqa, the group's de facto capital in Syria, some are now seeking to return to the country they once and perhaps still regard as their enemy. Well, over the next half an hour, we'll discuss how governments and policymakers should now deal with the threat of returning British foreign fighters with a panel of experts and specialists and decide if there can be justice for jihadis.
Are you kidding me?
Hi, Lolz Pigeon here. Welcome to my channel. Let's laugh at some fucking morons. Please like and subscribe for more.
Now, before we get their thoughts, let's first hear from a British IS fighter who's now in a Syrian jail and desperate to come home and face punishment. He spoke to our special correspondent, Alex Crawford, from a secret location in northern Syria.
Shabazz, hi. Alex Crawford from Sky News.
Shabazz Suleiman's story, by his own admission, is hard to believe.
I take responsibility. I was with ISIS. I was with a terrorist organization. I didn't kill anyone. I hope I didn't oppress anyone. I did have a Kalashnikov.
Well, I'm a free speech activist, so sometimes I say outrageous and controversial things. Sometimes I'm a jokester and a trickster and a Loki-esque figure. The political left, the feminists and the social justice warriors and the leftist journalists don't like me very much and call me a variety of names because they find me difficult to categorize. They don't understand how a gay guy could have these opinions or whatever. I don't really fit into any box, so I represent sort of a threat to them because I'm persuasive and charismatic and have a huge fan base. They just really don't know how to deal with me.
Very modest as well, darling.
Also very humble, very humble.
Because, Milo, I'm a feminist, and I'm proud to be a feminist, and a lot of what you say...
That's okay. I'm sure they'll cure you soon.
No.
There's chemotherapy for that.
No. I suppose, of course, everyone is entitled to a view and to free speech, but the issue that I have with you, and I suppose a number of critics have with you, is that you seem to just stir up hate for the sake of it, because you want to get a reaction, because you want to provoke, and you don't seem to then take the consequences for that.
I don't think it's fair to say I stir up hate. I mean, most people would admit, I think, if they're being fair and reasonable, it's very difficult to describe yourself as not a feminist if you're in public life. And that's an enforcement of a particular political orthodoxy that is not shared by the majority of the public. I mean, very few women describe themselves as feminists. Fewer than 1 in 5 in America, just 7% in England. I'm sure the numbers for Australia, being a very sensible country, are about the same. These ideas that are being enforced in popular culture and on TV are not views reflected in the public. And the gap between the media and people at home is growing all the time. That's my insight, and that's what I seek to expose and ridicule and have fun with. It's perfectly fine if you're a feminist. My problem isn't that. My problem is not you personally, but my problem is with those feminists who require us all in public to say we are too, when we might not be. We might think that feminism has run its course and had its day, I'm not particularly interested in anybody else's specific positions. What I'm interested in is an open marketplace of ideas. A fair, open system where everybody can express themselves without fear of censure, without fear of professional disaster or social, peril, just because they cracked the wrong joke on Twitter or because, they used the wrong language at work.
Can I just interrupt for a second, Milo, because just pick up on what Jess says. You do throw these social hand grenades out there, and you do say things like feminism is cancer, but if you drill down past the headlines and read some of your work, I've read your book, I've listened to a number of your podcasts, you do make some fair points, but do you think this kind of outrageous shtick that you have is hurting you and turning people off listening to you?
No, I think the opposite's happening. I mean, millions of people on Facebook, a sold-out tour. By the way, Sydney is completely sold out now. We're adding a new date on the 30th of November. Very obviously, the opposite is true. There is a huge appetite for somebody who doesn't mind thumbing their nose and sticking their tongue out and pointing their middle finger up at the scolds and the nannies and the people who want to tell us how to live.
Milo, you
for
do more
years,
than
conservatives...
But you do more than stick your tongue out. I mean, because of the sorts of things you've written along the lines of Islam is a cancer, feminism is a cancer.
I never wrote that, actually. That was invented by a journalist. The feminism's true.
You rally your followers for hate campaigns. There was Leslie Jones, who was in Ghostbusters.
Well, what do you mean by hate campaigns? I mean, this was invented by the media. I wrote a review of Ghostbusters.
Invented.
I don't want to get into little details, but
no,
I wrote a review of
detail.
Ghostbusters that defended her.
It isn't.
No. The little detail is that actually, I wrote a review of Ghostbusters that defended her. Then some people said some mean things about her, and I was blamed. Well, we don't blame Beyonce when her fans say mean things to Taylor Swift.
Wait a minute.
We don't blame, Justin Bieber when his
followers who said incredibly racist things about her.
Some mean people.
So
yeah,
why
and
then,
I went on CNN and I said it was horrible,
so
and
then,
I said it was terrible.
So
but
then
I'm
why
not responsible for what they say. I'm responsible for what I say.
Of a consequence of what you say, because I think there is so much hate in the world, and you seem to think it's funny. You seem to sort of think...
Oh, I do think it... No.
But it's not funny.
Most of what's characterised as hate and abuse and harassment, this is all a sort of a hysterical drumming. It's like a moral panic by the media. The reality is some people in power don't like jokes being made about them. And I'm perfectly happy to tell jokes about powerful people because they can take it. I don't tell jokes about ordinary private citizens. I don't ruin the lives of private citizens like journalists do. Gawker's journalists who destroyed that woman, Justine Sacco, because she told the wrong joke. I tell jokes about people in power. I tell jokes about politicians, celebrities, journalists, university professors. I tell jokes about people in positions of huge institutional power who can take it. I punch up, not down.
Talking of ouch, a professor in the US has landed herself in trouble somewhat for calling mathematics racially discriminating. Lady's name's Rochelle Gutierrez. She's from Illinois University. She's published a book in which she claims that aspects of that subject, maths, are an unearned privilege of white people.
On many levels, mathematics itself operates as whiteness. Who gets credit for doing and developing mathematics, who is capable in mathematics, and who is seen as part of the mathematical community is generally viewed as white.
Well, Gutierrez describes what she calls the use of political knowledge to teach mathematics. She argues that studying the subject perpetuates white privilege because its laws are largely ascribed to Europeans like Pythagoras. Follow me? Well, that idea hasn't sat too well with some of her students, certainly. Here's some of the negative reviews she got on the website Rate My Professors. For instance, her students accused her of racism, claiming she said there's no white privilege in her classes and that she makes assumptions about languages spoken by ethnic minorities. We spoke to a marketing professor who told us it's important that students get equal access to learning, but we can't expect everyone to achieve the same.
I think it really comes from this idea of identity politics. So truth becomes secondary to protecting so-called marginalized peoples, right? So in that case, to the extent that, say, mathematics is dominated by one racial group more so than another, then there's something wrong with it and we need to address it. You should have equality of access, but that doesn't mean that we have equality of outcomes. And that's the problem with identity politics, is it wants that the outcome be equal, and that simply is not in line with the meritocracy. My rebuttal to this is if you look at the 100 meters Olympic champions in the Olympics over the past 30 years, you'll notice that there are no overweight, middle-aged Lebanese Jews. I happen to be a Lebanese Jew. None of them are the winners on the podium, right? Yet I don't complain that I feel marginalized because it would appear that the winners of the 100 meters Olympic all tend to come from one racial group.